John, you can begin in about 1 minute.
Okay.
You can begin now, John.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, and thanks everyone for attending What's New in Webex 2021. My name is John McCarthy. I provide executive oversight to ATSG's collaboration portfolio of services. We're very excited for today's event. We'll be covering the most recent updates made to the Webex suite and how Cisco is working to better enable hybrid work environments. We'll also be covering the new devices that Cisco has brought to market and some of the recent promotions that are available. Our agenda today will cover a variety of areas. Cisco's response to the pandemic, what Cisco is known for with Webex, which is meetings and the innovations associated with that, the devices that have been introduced to make those meetings experiences of higher value, the new capabilities with Webex calling, the further information around the Webex suite, and also contact center innovations that are now part of that Webex suite. As a thank you for those attending, the first 25 people who registered for this event will receive a free Cisco Webex desk camera. The ATSG marketing team will be in touch after the event is over to coordinate delivery to you. So thank you for your attendance. Our speaker today is Brian Pagliuso. Brian is the Senior Director for Enterprise Architecture. And Brian's a 15-year history in our industry, is an expert in the areas of collaboration, security, and networking. So Brian, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So guys, just FYI for everybody that's on the call, I'd like to say that I think that's more of a fancy title for a lot of what I do around technology and innovation within our client base. So really my passion, my joy, what I like to do is really sit down with our customers, consult with customers, understand really business requirements, and then help map technical solutions into those business requirements to deliver on outcomes. Again, I really see myself as a consultant to you and somebody that's available at a no-charge basis to you. So as John mentioned, we're going to go through some of the innovation that's been driven into the Cisco Webex platform over the last 12 to 18 months. And again, high level, different points within the Webex portfolio. I think a lot of folks, when they think of Webex, like John mentioned, you do think of meetings. Cisco has rebranded a lot of their different technology components within the UC portfolio to fall under the Webex umbrella, which is why you'll hear terms such as Webex calling, Webex meetings, Webex messaging, a lot of different things under one umbrella. So hopefully I can demystify some of that confusion that may be surrounding the overall portfolio. as well as open some folks' eyes to some of the new components that make Webex, in my opinion, pretty unique in the marketplace and hyper competitive when it comes to some of the other vendors out there. So first thing we'll cover a few things around, hey, what has Cisco done when it's come to the overall C-19 pandemic? We're all living it. We're all working from home for the most part. Everybody's hybrid. Stacy, if you could jump to the next slide, please. A lot of the feedback that we, as well as Cisco, have been hearing from customers, quality needs improvement, feature functionality, and overall platform delivery, too slow to market, right? From a cost perspective, hey, some of the other competitors out there are coming in at what we feel is a better price point. We've all heard it. I think a lot of you folks have probably said it. I think Cisco really went back into the drawing board. They went into the skunkworks development department again and really got back down to grassroots around what they do best. And they reinvented the overall product line in terms of what they're looking to offer to customers from a complete collaboration suite, again, under the Webex umbrella. And that's hopefully what I'm going to touch on. And any Q&A, obviously, we'll save to the end, but we're certainly open to any of your questions, comments, and feedback. Next, Stacy. So what has Cisco done when it comes to addressing the different concerns that customers have? I mentioned the overall branding. I think that's one piece of it. Cisco's been driving tons of innovation into the overall portfolio, whether it's calling, whether it's meetings, whether it's messaging. Different feature functionality. They've also come up with better pricing models and more competitive pricing to stave off some of the competition that's out there. And then from a quality perspective, from an insights, analytics, and I think that's really the biggest thing in my opinion is the overall analytics. Like, what do you know about what's going on with that environment? How can you look at those analytics and use them as BI or business intelligence to help improve what you're doing for your end users, for your customers? How could we look at this information and do a better job for our customers? So I think Cisco's done a great job, in my opinion, over the last 18 months of addressing a lot of the common concerns that have been out there from a customer standpoint. Next, Stacey. Cool, thank you. So I mentioned all the innovation that's been driven into the platform. As you can see, there's a ton, right? And I'm not going to go through everyone. I'm not going to read off of the slide, but you can see that Cisco's not been sitting around. They haven't been lazy. They've really gone back into, like I mentioned, the development shop, complete grassroots effort to innovate into the platform across all the different modalities of communication, calling, meetings, messaging, and then the actual delivery of those devices, cell phones, web delivery, content delivery, etc. They've also made some strategic acquisitions to improve the platform. So Babel Labs, I'm not sure if any of you folks have heard about that right now or in the past, but what Babel Labs is, and I think what the really most famous component of that will be is noise reduction or platform noise reduction. So if I was fiddling with my papers, hopefully right now you can't hear that. That's Babel Labs, right? It's filtering out all that white noise, that background noise for better sound, better quality, and better end user acceptance. IMI Mobile, I'll get into that a little more towards the end. It's more of a contact center component, builds a lot of artificial intelligence into the contact center platform, which Cisco has a few different components to the contact center platform. I won't even go into that today just because it's such a wide portfolio. Slido for meetings feedback, pre, post, and I'll hit that as well. Socio and Volvio. Again, I'm not going to go into all these different components right away, but rest assured that these are strategic acquisitions that have improved overall quality of the platform. And Cisco is going to continue, hey, if we can't build it, we're going to buy it, and we're going to keep improving our solutions. Next slide, Stacey, please. We'll talk about some of the innovations in Webex meetings. So I mentioned Slido before. I think most folks are familiar with Webex or just meetings in general, polling. So the Slido platform, it allows better and more comprehensive pre, during, and post meeting survey, data collection, live polling, Q&A during a session, and it collects all that information so that at the end of the meeting, it's also discernible. So From a panelist perspective, right now Stacy's driving the overall meeting. She's going to be able to collect a lot of the data. If we were using Slido for polling, right, she'd be able to collect that, analyze it, decipher it, and obviously take some actions out of some of the content that's coming in. The Q&A panel at the end, obviously that'll all be held by the Slido platform, and we'll be able to leverage that again just for crowdsourcing type information, if you want to look at it that way, as well as data collection. Next, please. Cool. Thank you. So some of the additional innovations, and I'm going to keep saying that word, innovation, right? That's really what I see going into the platform. And I think that's what keeps certain things competitive. I think it keeps it, live, fresh in people's minds. Noise reduction. So I mentioned the Babel Labs component, real-time language translation. So Webex can also, we could be speaking in English, Spanish, French, doesn't really matter. Webex could do real-time translation so that some folks that could be on the meeting, they could be just fluent in French, but not English as a second language or Spanish or whatever, and still understanding what I'm saying from closed captioning of the real-time translation component. Webex AI, I'll kind of talk about that a little bit more as we continue to go through the meeting, as well as people insights. I'll touch on that individually. Webex Assistant for searchability within the meetings, environmental sensors, right? A lot of this stuff is to give overall business intelligence on what's happening during a meeting. What are the overall environmental characteristics of a meeting? How many folks join a meeting from a particular room? Was it overstuffed? Is it a safety hazard, right? So safety, occupational safety, safety health hazard, all that stuff is really built into making a better overall end user experience and a better meeting experience. Next, please. Thank you. So one other thing that's pretty cool, in my opinion, is the overall capability to do embedded applications within Webex. So, hey, right now we can have a Webex meeting. We can all sit here. We can collaborate. We can use voice, video. We can present data. However, a lot of the times, some of that data that we want to interact on is stored in different business systems on the back end. We can build in, there's custom and there's also plugin. We can build in web control components into the meeting itself. So we might be talking about, something from a financial perspective on the back end. We use Dynamics with a web front end. We could plug that in as one of our embedded apps. So as we're talking through different components of, let's say a transaction that the business has made, we can pull up that Dynamics interface, share it directly within the Webex from that plug-in app right on the side of the Webex component without having to go and share a completely separate app, bring it up, launch it. So in my opinion, I think that's really a neat and useful tool. It's not just one of those, hey, wow factors. It's something that really drives value. Next, please. So I mentioned this a little bit before, and I wanted to go into it a little bit more now. So from a people-focused perspective, I think this is actually pretty neat. So if you wanted to zoom in on one person and focus directly on them in the meeting, you could pin that particular person up. So even when another speaker starts talking, it doesn't change video. You might be having an IM or a chat conversation on the side with that individual, so you want to see facial reactions. From a team insights perspective, what this is doing, it's really more geared towards the messaging component of Webex, so the Webex application, and it's looking at calendar plugins, it's looking at how your day is structured, it's looking at the amount of Webexes, the amount of meetings that you attend throughout the day, or how many meetings do you accept and you actually don't attend, or do you set yourself up with a certain amount of focus time. This is really good, again, from a business analytics and a business intelligence standpoint. So we can go back into an analytics portal and look at all this information to understand, how are our people working? Are they actually working healthy? Is somebody sitting there 12 hours a day on Webex meetings, which then all of a sudden means, I think everybody knows what that means. At the end of the day, you're going to be putting in 5, 6, 7 more hours on top of that just to get done what you guys all talked about throughout the day on those Webex meetings. From a leadership standpoint, they can kind of review what's happening within the organization, how folks are working, how much time people are putting in, so they can start being a little bit more predictable in terms of workforce management, workforce optimization, staffing, resource levels, etc. Next, please. Thank you. So now I'll touch on some of the devices. A lot of the devices that Cisco puts out, you can flip to the next, Stacy, are dual registration capable. And what does that mean? It means that they can register either to on-prem systems or to cloud-based systems, Webex, the Webex cloud. What's the benefit of that? Well, when you register your devices to the Webex cloud, there's a lot more innovation than you would from an on-prem system. Content sharing, facial recognition, and again, the overall innovation theme strikes home, because if you're registered to an on-prem system, your devices will only update and gain feature functionality as quickly as you're updating your on-prem systems. How often does that happen in any enterprise environment? Probably not as often as it's going to happen in the cloud. So again, cloud delivery is a great way to keep up with the Joneses, right? driving adoption, as well as being able to access those different features and capabilities as soon as they're published out to the cloud. Next, please. And we're going to go through a few of the newer components that have been issued out. I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with these traditional Cisco DX80s, Webex room kits, older SX components, right? You might be familiar with those. There's a whole new launch of devices that have come out. So one of them is the Webex Desk Mini. Think of this as, and Stacy gave me a pretty good analogy last week, and I said, yeah, that really makes sense. Your own personal mobile Sonos device. So while you can use it for meetings, for Webex, for video, it can also play music. You can take it from work to home. It's a very portable device. As you can see, pretty small, 15.6 inches. Dynamic touchscreen, adaptive touchscreen, so that when you're in a video and or when you're joining a meeting, you can do it via the touchscreen. You could also use it as a second display if you chose to. Again, very similar to the concept of the desktop units from the past, the old EX systems, EX90s, if you're familiar with those, DX80s, but in a much more, much smaller form factor, much more mobile. Thank you. New Webex board capability. So I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the Webex board, but again, cloud registered device. It can tie right into your Webex application, so you can share content through your Webex app from your desktop to the board without directly connecting to it. You can connect it to the cloud. You can dial directly into Webex meetings. You can do SIP dialing. You can do SIP URI-based dialing. And there's a few different form factors depending on the room. So in the past, where there was only the 55 and the 75, there's also an 85-inch screen now. So you can use it for bigger rooms, bigger meeting spaces, a lot more people that can be huddled into that room together. And there's also, on the larger unit, you can also get a wheel stand for it if you wanted to move it, be able to move it from one room to another. This, I'm going to say, is a little bit more futuristic, not directly available now, but it is something that a lot of different manufacturers have been looking at. Cisco's really doubling down on this capability and this technology. It's called Webex Hologram. So any of you folks out there that are Avengers fans are probably going to be familiar with this. Think of Robert Downey Jr. or Tony Stark being able to 3D model or render some kind of scenario, some kind of situation. That's really what you're looking at and what we're trying to deliver when we talk about the hologram technology. Now, unfortunately, it's going to require the use of additional glasses. I believe that those glasses, from a form factor standpoint, they're going to get a lot smaller. They're going to get a lot more realistic and usable in the future. Again, future capability, but again, super, super cool, especially when you're thinking of manufacturing, development, trying to dissect a certain problem statement, if you want to look at it that way, from a 3D perspective. So for any of you that don't know, Cisco is in the headset business. They have a whole line of different types of headsets with a boom on them, mono, stereo. The newest one that came out is the 908 model. So this is for all of the folks that like the high fidelity audio files out there. You can use it to listen to music while you're not on a meeting, but when you are on a meeting, it gives you that super high fidelity quality sound to interact with the meeting, and they're very mobile too. So Bluetooth connected, obviously, so you can roam around, so you don't have to be 100% stationary, like I am right now. I'd love to have a pair of those on and walk around at the moment. Start talking about all these devices, and everybody's going to say, well, what do I need to do to implement them? What do they cost? Cisco is running a device cloud promotion right now. So all of the different devices that are, well, not all of them, most of the different devices. So I mentioned room kits earlier. I mentioned Desk Pros. I mentioned different headsets, etc. Cisco does have promotional pricing on all those different devices right now. Now, what you're looking at there are list prices. So that wouldn't reflect what your street price would be. So it'd be whatever that is after discount. Next. Okay. So this has been a big topic for a long time, right? People want to be able to interact with folks regardless of the platform that they're sitting on. Over the last, I'm going to say a couple of years, unfortunately for a long time, there hasn't been a super high level of integration between different platforms, whether it's Cisco, Microsoft, Google, Zoom, etc. A lot of different capabilities have been released over the last 6 months that allow some of that integration to take place right now. So a simple SIP to SIP dial. So I can easily dial a Zoom registered device. A Zoom device could register me on my DX, right? That's easy. Microsoft, from a protocol standpoint, is a little bit different than Cisco. Some of the protocols that they use, I'm not going to say are non-standard, but it's different, right? It's not the exact same SIP, and every manufacturer's implementation of SIP is slightly different from the other just because of the way the RFCs and the ratification is. What Cisco and other vendors have done, right, to provide interop between their different components is leveraging WebRTC 2.0. So all of the new Cisco devices do have built-in WebRTC capability. So now I can actually dial directly into a Microsoft Teams meeting, right, without having to use the Teams interoperability client. I get direct dial from a WebRTC perspective. There is some functionality that, it's not 100% like I was joining a Cisco to Cisco meeting or a Microsoft to Microsoft meeting. There are, obviously right now there are some feature gaps in there, but I can pretty confidently say that I do see continued innovation into the interop standpoint, because that's what every one of our customers is asking for every day. Next, please. Thank you. So now I'll go into a little bit on the calling platform, some of the innovations from a calling perspective, some pretty cool stuff that's coming down the road. Next one, Stace. Webex Go. So what is Webex Go? What does it really mean? So what Webex Go is an extension of your business line to your personal communications device. Now, when I say that, I'm sure a lot of people out there are saying, well, you know what? We've had that forever with single number reach. That would be a true statement. However, this is not single number reach. This is actually pinning your business line to your cell phone, to your mobile device, whatever it might be, and giving you the same feature functionality from the calling application that's native to your phone. Why is that cool? Because you no longer have to download, install a separate client on your mobile platform. It's all leveraging the native dialer app, and it can be completely controlled within the Webex Control Hub. So for those that don't know, that's the admin interface that allows you to control and configure and enable different features and functions for the different pieces underneath the overall Webex portfolio for your users. Next, please. Thank you. And then from a buying perspective, we mentioned this before, this was a big one, right? Customers are asking, hey, Webex SKUs, Cisco SKUs in general, it's complicated. If I look at a Cisco bill of material, I'm not sure what I'm looking at because there's so many different components to it. And why do I have to buy one piece, then buy something totally separate just to complement what I have? From a Webex perspective, that's gone, right? So Cisco has introduced what they're referring to as the Webex Suite. That's a single part number for all of your meetings, calling, and messaging. So from an enterprise agreement standpoint, a customer can go in, request, hey, you know what, I want to enable calling, meetings, messaging, or just calling meetings, whatever it might be, for 250 users, for 500 users, right? Now there's a very simplified SKU that allows us to go into the configuration tool, create that configuration, and then price it out pretty quickly. And it's also at a very competitive price point. So what you're looking at there again is $11.95 per user per month, because everything is subscription based now, for all of the different components within the Webex portfolio. And again, that's list price, so it'd be that minus discount. Cisco's also introduced the concept of a reduction in licensing. So in the past, whenever you've purchased licensing, and with other vendors, it's still the same way, right? If you purchase a 3-year commitment, 5-year commitment, whatever it might be, you're kind of locked into that license count for the duration of the contract. If you increase, obviously that contract value is going to increase, but you can't decrease. So with Cisco, after the second year in a minimum 3-year contract, you're allowed to decrease your overall license counts and cost. Obviously, your monthly invoicing will decrease as long as your average utilization is lower than what you initially signed up for. So again, I think that's pretty cool. I think that's answering a lot of the questions or comments and feedback that customers have come up with around, hey, what if my licensing levels decrease? What if my staffing levels change, whatever it might be? So this is how Cisco's going to address it. Cool. So again, with the Webex meeting suite, right, you can essentially relicense your overall portfolio that you might have today. So if you had Webex meetings in place today and you convert it over to Webex suite, your contract value is actually going to decrease. So from a financial perspective, it certainly makes sense to at least look into that. If you're an existing Webex calling customer, you can add meetings to that and again, these are list prices, so keep that in mind, for just $2 per user per month. And then same thing with UCM Cloud, and I'm not going to get into the whole what is UCM Cloud for those that are not familiar, but think of Cisco Call Manager in the cloud that you no longer have to manage, right? Your provider can manage it for you, but again, you can add meetings onto that suite for just $1.15 more if it's something you chose to look at. Just high level, and I kind of hate these slides because they just become an eye chart, but it just gives you a look at what's included in the Webex suite right out of the gate and what also is optional. So as you can see, you'll get meetings, calling, cloud device registrations included, Webex Assistant, which I mentioned before, Webex Assistant for closed captioning, for translation services, that's all included, same with Slido. Some of the additional components that you can start considering are, Event Center, and again, events up to 5,000 participants is included. From a named user model, you'll still get Event Center, just on a lower tier. So as you can see, and again, I'm not going to read through the entire slide, there's different components to that, and a lot of what I think we do on a daily basis is helping customers decipher the overall licensing models that Cisco pushes out there. It's gotten a lot easier, though. I'll give them a lot of credit. Things have gotten much easier when it comes to licensing. And then I think the last component I just wanted to touch on is some of the innovations that have been driven into the contact center. So Cisco made the acquisition of IMI Mobile about coming up on 12 months ago, roughly, something like that. So what is IMI Mobile? IMI Mobile is an artificial intelligence engine that builds itself into the contact center platform. So let's say you're calling in, and instead of going through a super complicated IVR, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, would you like to talk to an agent? A lot of that front-end intelligence is figured out the second you call in. So it's looking at the DNS you called in on, the ANI that you're calling in or sometimes you might have to hit a small IVR, put in some basic information, or potentially even do some speech recognition to figure out who you are. Based on that, from a back-end AI perspective, we can decipher, hey, who you are. Are you, as an example, a high net worth client? Are you coming up on max threshold from a balance perspective on a credit card, right? We can do a lot of that stuff in advance, so that by the time a call gets to an agent, 90% of that caller's initial questions have probably been answered through an automated system. And then they're really just talking to an agent at that point for potentially an upsell, right? For an additional transaction that the caller didn't even think they were going to make when they called in. So again, some pretty cool AI stuff that gets built into the contact center. That integration, as well as others, is continuing to evolve. And I think, you know, in my opinion, I could see this as being like super, super critical, because nobody wants to sit on the phone anymore. Nobody wants to sit there and talk to an IVR, wait for an agent, whatever it might be. When you could build a lot of automation into your overall contact center workflow, there's a tremendous amount of business value to your company, as well as customer experience. You know, customers are going to love to not have to sit again through an IVR, talking to an agent, and just being on hold for an extended period of time. All right, so we have plenty of time for any Q&A, folks, that's out there. I think this is actually my favorite time, since I'm not going through an overall script that we've developed in advance, right? We can start talking brass tacks if anybody has anything they want to go through.
Brian, I did see some questions in the chat and in the Q&A section of the event. I don't know if you can you see those on the right?
I was keeping it closed, which didn't distract me. Actually, no, I cannot, Stacy.
Okay, so I will. Bear with me. I thought I saw some things pop up in the in the chat. Okay. Okay, so our first question is from Joe. VDI has taken off during COVID. Most solutions are still playing catch up in the VDI space. What has Cisco and Webex done in this space?
So great question. I was actually just in the throes of a project right now with a customer out in the Midwest. So this particular customer leverages virtual desktops for their entire organization. And due to security concerns, right, they don't like to open up their internal infrastructure to the internet. So again, complete VDI delivery, controlled desktop, pretty much locked down. So what has Cisco done to make sure that they can guarantee a quality experience with Webex when it's being delivered in a VDI platform? So there's what's referred to as the Webex plugin for VDI. What that does is it does a desktop rendering of all of the screen information. So you get that typical 128K stream from end client to the VDI, to the server. So that's where it stops, right? So then the end user is not going out from a web perspective. However, what happens is on the actual VDI endpoint, a Webex client is deployed, and it's compatible with Windows devices, PCs, Macs, and really any of the other devices out there that support VDI, right? So what happens is the real-time information, voice and video, is processed locally. So you do have a quality experience, and you're not trying to support that over a VDI session, over that encapsulated 128K kilobit stream that's going back to the VDI session. So again, all the real-time processing happens locally. At desktop sharing, the desktop interaction is all at the VDI.
Great, thank you. And then the next question is, and this was in regards to the devices, I believe it was the Webex board. Do you need a specific screen for this, or if you have a screen already in the conference room, in the conference room, can that be used? It already has a computer connected to it.
You can. The difference between, if I understand the question correctly, what's being asked is, if I have a computer connected, joining a WebEx, and then sharing to the screen via like HDMI or whatever protocol, is that good enough? Yeah, absolutely it is. You can still support that. You can still participate in meetings. Some of the differences, however, with some of the devices that I was talking about before, WebEx boards, WebEx room kits, they register directly with the Webex cloud. They will support touchscreen capabilities because of the devices themselves. However, they're also able to do some business intelligence, some forensics, right? Keying in on folks that are in there. So when you're joining from a computer, as an example, like right now, if I was in a meeting from a computer and I had like 3 or 4 people around me, and one person on my left started talking, person on my right started talking, I'm still focused on the camera that's directly in front of me, so it's not going to dynamically shift. With the room kits, with the new device innovation that's out there, so not only is it a much better camera, but it's also taking advantage of what we used to call speaker track. So that same scenario, right? I'll have a Webex room kit in front of me or my Desk Pro in front of me. I'll have 3, 4 people around and, project this out to a bigger conference room where you have 8, 10, 20 people even. It'll start zooming in on active speaker. So where my laptop can't do that, the cloud registered devices with that different camera technology embedded in it will be able to zoom in, focus directly on active speakers without you having to like pin it up or change anything.
Okay, and we have one more question just circling back to the VDI conversation. They wanted to know, does this only work on W10 IoT VDI thin clients?
It does not. It'll also support Linux devices. So W10, I'm assuming you mean Windows 10, Windows, Mac type, really any VDI type compliant device. And there's a whole list of them out there. We could certainly provide that, but it is more than just Windows-based platforms.
Great. That was the last of our questions.
Cool. Well, guys, again, like I said, I love consulting with customers. I love kind of digging into these different challenges and scenarios and coming up with something that I think typically is unique. So certainly reach out to Stacy, to anybody, on the meeting, right, to any of our contacts, and we can definitely set up a consult if anybody's interested in going through this more a little deeper.
Great, thank you, Brian. And just as a reminder, we will be reaching out to you right after the meeting is over just to get your shipping information for your free Webex desk camera. Thank you for joining, everyone.
Thank you, guys.